Hi, I'm John Пайпер, Vice President of Research and Development at MIM Software. MIM Software is an industry leader in fusion software and is excited to be partnering with BK Ultrasound, a leader in urology ultrasound. Together, we bring the first integrated MRI ultrasound fusion system on a premium urology ultrasound called BK Fusion. At MIM, we've been developing fusion and registration tools for more than 15 years and hold numerous patents and firsts in the field. Fusion is overlaying one image or aspects of that image onto another, much like augmented reality. Registration is the process of establishing a map of anatomical correspondence between the two images, thereby enabling fusion. In medical imaging, this is generally accomplished with a rigid transformation or an elastic transformation. In this video, I will discuss the challenges with these approaches for prostate MRI ultrasound fusion and introduce a new solution called Predictive Fusion. In practice, you want any registration algorithm to be accurate, fast, and have any errors be obvious. Our goal in software fusion is to reduce the uncertainty inherent in so-called cognitive registration. Rigid registration simply means that the MRI is allowed to only translate and rotate in order to match the ultrasound. This method can be relatively fast, but is only accurate if the prostate is compressed the same in the MRI image without a probe to the ultrasound image with a probe. Fortunately, these errors due to compression are easy to detect. However, because the image acquisition orientation differs, what the radiologist calls transverse on the MRI can be significantly different than what the urologist calls transverse on the ultrasound. In other words, the prostate is typically oriented up to 30 degrees off axis in the MRI as compared to the ultrasound, and this can be a difficult error to detect during fusion. To correct this source of error, MIM Software introduced the MIM Reslicer, a tool which allows the radiologist to correct this orientation difference and to prepare the MRI for a more accurate fusion. By simply positioning and orienting a virtual probe over the MRI image, the radiologist can remove the greatest source of registration error and uncertainty, making the final registration faster, more accurate, and leaving potential errors more detectable. However, these rigid methods still leave us with inaccuracies due to compression of the prostate. These inaccuracies are detectable, which means we can make adjustments so that we don't miss the target when we are confident that we are actually hitting it. But the error is still there. Elastic or deformable registration gives us more freedom to correct for these compression differences. Elastic registration allows the MRI to stretch, bend, compress, and expand to match the ultrasound. Due to significant differences between the MRI and ultrasound images, image-based elastic registration is a very difficult problem to solve. To avoid these difficulties, most software systems use landmark or contour-based elastic registration. This approach takes manually or automatically identified landmarks or contours on the MRI and ultrasound and deforms the MRI until they match. So for the extra minutes it takes to contour the prostate on both images, and the time it takes to run the algorithm, the software can give a registration which will match the contours nearly perfectly. Sounds great, right? Ironically, that's exactly the problem. Unfortunately, that perfect-looking result is actually hiding all the errors accumulated along the way. For example, that rotational error that we talked about before will get baked into the final registration, resulting in rotational uncertainty. Add to that the variability in MRI prostate capsule interpretation. Even if the same physician contours the same prostate on the MRI, there will be variability. The same uncertainty in ultrasound contouring likely exceeds the uncertainty in MRI and adds to the error. But both of these errors pale in comparison to the differences in how you contour the prostate on MRI versus ultrasound. Even without compression differences, the two imaging modalities show the prostate differently, so you're contouring two different things. And in most cases, they're contoured by two different people. Compound all of these sources of inaccuracy together, and the resulting elastic registration, which may look like pinpoint targeting, can be fraught with as much or more error than the rigid registration that we started with, but unfortunately, with no detectability. Because the prostate matches perfectly, you'll always be confident in the registration, but may not always hit the actual target. An elastic registration requires more time to contour and more time to execute. That's why we developed Predictive Fusion. Predictive Fusion starts with the MIM reslicer, removing the source of greatest registration uncertainty. Then it displays the contours of the MRI prostate over the live ultrasound, giving you a guide to match when you're positioning the probe. Unlike rigid or elastic fusion, which attempt to correct errors after the ultrasound is acquired, Predictive Fusion gives you a guide to remove those errors before acquiring the ultrasound, before they become errors. And since the registration is predicted, based on the radiologist's virtual probe, the registration process is even faster than a rigid registration, typically only taking seconds. In the end, Predictive Fusion gives you a result which avoids the uncertainty of elastic registration while making errors plain, allowing you to adjust or correct before taking a biopsy or delivering treatment. You're probably thinking that this sounds biased, but it's not. Fusion and registration are at the very core of what we do at MIM. We have led the industry in the development of rigid and elastic registration algorithms and have pioneered these to solve a variety of clinical problems. Both rigid and elastic registration significantly improves prostate biopsy, and the literature shows neither is superior to the other. Predictive Fusion, however, was uniquely developed for the specific task of fusing prostate MRI to ultrasound. Predictive Fusion was designed to closely fit your traditional biopsy workflow, requiring minimal extra steps and saving you time while providing a fusion you can trust.